Welcome back to our channel where we share updates and untold stories about Catherine, Princess of Wales and her royal family. Today, we bring you some news: Princess Anne's final decision to end, Camilla's son's future after shocking secret recording, revealed an argument that was substantial and dramatic among members of the British royal family, was sparked by what seemed to be a small change in seating during a solemn service that took place in Westminster Abbey. Diverse interpretations of the monarchy's intended meaning have been brought to light as a result of a visual reconfiguration that was done badly at a monument honoring troops. On one side stood Princess Anne, also known as the Princess Royal. Her life has been defined by a sense of responsibility, service, and a firm dedication to the ideas that have been passed down through the institution. On the other hand, Queen Consort Camilla and her son Tom Parker Bowles argued for a more delicate and integrated portrayal of the monarchy inside the family. The occurrences that took place, a campaign that was methodically managed, a tape that was made in secret, a private encounter, and an urgent royal council exposed the fragility of institutional norms in situations when personal ambition, media strategy, and modern image-building meet. Ceremony permeated the service that was being held. There is a perceptible atmosphere emanating from the great nave of Westminster Abbey, which is defined by its ancient stone and its high ceilings. This atmosphere is marked by quiet, the reverberation of footfall, the aroma of beeswax on polished wood, and sunlight flowing through stained glass, throwing multicolored shards across the aisles. In order to pay tribute to those who have served their country, the highest royals of the nation, together with military authorities and civic leaders, got together. The seating arrangements, processions, music, and the order in which events take place are just as important as the words that are uttered from the pulpit about these rites, which are planned with the precision that is typical of institutions that have been around for centuries. The placement of persons adjacent to one another and the seating arrangements of individuals are examples of subtle ways in which hierarchy and affiliation are shown. These visual clues comprise a kind of constitutional language. Princess Anne arrived as she always does. She was well prepared, she was efficient but not pompous, and she had the manner of a person who has consistently been conditioned throughout her life to represent continuity. Over the course of many decades, she has had a unique position within the hierarchy of the royal family. She is the second child of the late Queen Elizabeth II and is considered to be one of the most hard-working royals. A record of her public life includes governmental obligations, military connections, philanthropic activities, and patronages. She also had a record of military associations. When describing her, those who have worked with her often use the same descriptors: precise, honest, realistic, and devoid of romanticism toward appearance. When it comes to people who see the monarchy as an institution, Anne's conspicuous participation at national events acts as a concrete and stable symbol. This is because the continuity of the crown is preserved not just via genealogy, but also by the public acknowledgement of those lineages. On the other hand, Anne found out that the seat, which was essentially reserved for a senior and closely associated monarch, was already occupied when she arrived in the row that she had visited for a long time. Tom Parker Bowles was there. He is known in the public domain for his culinary television shows, written articles, and restaurant criticisms. In addition, he is Camilla's son from her previous marriage, thus he was also present. Tom is not a participant in the line of succession and does not possess a royal title. While Anne was demoted to a secondary role, which is often allocated for distant relatives or municipal authorities, he was given the responsibility of resolving the dispute within the immediate family. The modification went beyond just rearranging the seating arrangement. It acted as a visible proclamation that the family's public image might be broadened to include those who, due to their lineage, are not eligible for the royal succession. Although King Charles III and Queen Consort Camilla were seated together, Tom's presence in the front row produced a picture of a modern blended family that was ready to be captured by the cameras. This image was widely distributed over the world. The arrangement was the primary focus of the press photographers. Newspapers and social media platforms quickly circulated the image, which was followed by commentary that ranged from ecstatic, such as a new family portrait, to slightly appreciative, such as a modern monarchy embracing new bonds. Some media sources gave a viewpoint that was energizingly contemporary, while others showed institutional cynicism, but with tales of togetherness that helped to lighten their tone. Princess Anne ostensibly maintained her poise throughout the event. She adhered to the procedures, positioned herself as instructed, and executed her public-facing responsibilities with the same controlled professionalism she applies to every engagement. However, some in her inner circle assert that she was profoundly disturbed. In their opinion, this was not an accidental misplacement. To Anne and several unvoiced traditionalists inside royal circles, the seat had not just been reassigned, it had been symbolically relinquished. The selection indicated a deliberate conflation of differences between those who receive positions by virtue of lineage and those who are included via marriage or affiliation. For an organization grounded in heritage, that difference is significant. It delineates who embodies continuity and who enhances it. Subsequently, during the casual reception following the ceremony, the mood became more rigid. Colleagues often characterize Camilla as socially proficient and media-savvy, with a superior comprehension of contemporary public dynamics compared to some of her peers. Witness accounts indicate that she chose to assess the situation at that point. While approaching Anne in a corner of the drawing room, she reportedly said that the monarchy must allow the new generation to emerge, and that the family should seem more accessible to a transforming public. The language was polite, although the underlying message was clear. The seating arrangement was a calculated indication, and Camilla aimed to subtly guide the institution towards a contemporary, family-centric image in which her relatives might assume prominent roles. Anne's response, as reported by others who subsequently described the interaction, was polite but resolute. She reportedly reminded Camilla subtly, but with the authority of one used to being acknowledged, that the crown is determined by lineage and succession, rather than by guest lists or public relations inclinations. The discussion transformed a potential minor disagreement about etiquette into a significant divide, the conflict between two ideas of monarchy. For Camilla, the reconfiguration signified an opportunity to show the family as more amiable, approachable, and less ensconced in hereditary status. For Anne, it represented a deterioration of the fundamental foundations she believed sustained the institution's stability. The subsequent events did not constitute an explicit conflict characterized by public declarations or media disputes. Rather, it was a campaign conducted in the subtler, more subdued arenas where contemporary reputations are constructed and dismantled, the scheduling of official appearances, the dissemination of favorable profiles in strategically positioned media, and the obfuscation of a public figure by postponing or canceling their public responsibilities. Insiders at Clarence House. Camilla's operational headquarters allegedly initiated a covert effort to enhance Camilla's close circle, while reducing the prominence of those whose positions were predicated on the rigid principles of succession. Camilla and Tom convened secretly to deliberate about future developments. They acknowledged that Princess Anne commanded much respect, in contrast to younger, more prominent royals whose popularity is mostly generational. Anne's appreciation transcends age and political affiliations. That influence rendered her both an advantage and a potential impediment. The resulting approach was strategic, rather than simplistic, gradually shape public opinion, allow narratives of modernization and relatability to establish themselves, and when needed, subtly challenge the relevance of outdated standards without direct confrontation. To do this, Camilla allegedly enlisted a communications director from the corporate sector, somebody proficient in reputation management and media placement. The objective was to develop a nuanced campaign that would not seem like a frontal assault, but would gently alter people's perceptions of the monarchy's representation. The first aspect was on the media-orchestrated leaks. Anonymous briefings and strategically timed narratives would instill skepticism about Anne. National publications started publishing more lenient investigative articles and opinion pieces. Columnists discussed contemporary expectations about charity openness and scrutinized the adequacy of previous royal sponsorship schemes. Headlines challenged administrative control and suggested without direct accusation that certain enduring royal initiatives deserved further examination. The coverage was intentionally insinuative rather than accusatory. Its purpose was to foster skepticism rather than provoke legal responses. Simultaneously, the second aspect diminished Anna's public visibility. Scheduling complications proliferated. Invitations she had previously accepted were deferred due to logistical considerations. Events at which she was scheduled to participate were discreetly rescheduled. Her office at Kensington Palace had an abnormal frequency of cancellations and last-minute modifications. When aides sought explanation, event organizers, courteous and professional, suggested that directives originated from higher authorities. Such modifications are usually feasible within a family as prominent as the royals, but the pattern, timing, consistency, and the manner in which cancellations coincided with favorable media coverage for Camilla's circle implied a deliberate approach. Anne saw personnel changes at the core of royal communication. Personnel who had served throughout Queen Elizabeth II's long reign, those familiar with the essential but unremarkable intricacies of etiquette and information dissemination, were either reassigned or discreetly retired. They were replaced by younger public relations specialists trained in corporate communications, adept in brand storytelling and internet engagement. Speculation arose that the new communications operators had pre-existing affiliations with teams associated with the Queen Consort. Within weeks, Anne learned from veteran personnel that the communications role seemed to, in effect, report to Clarence House. The new staff crafted social media postings, organized media placements, and constructed daily narratives, the subtle mechanisms that over time influence public image. Collectively, the media nudges schedule discrepancies and communication. Restructuring indicated a calculated, if understated, effort to realign public focus. Anne had no definitive evidence to present publicly and recognized that any forceful public retaliation may be disastrous for the crown. As the strain intensified, she resorted to her customary approach. She methodically prepared and depended on the discrete networks associated with established organizations. She commenced meticulous documentation, recording canceled appointments, monitoring media storylines, and discreetly inquiring with trusted confidants of the individuals responsible for certain choices. The pivotal moment emerged as subtly as the first transformation in the form of a confidential private solicitation from Prince William. One evening, as rain blended with the verdant hues of late fall, Anne got an invitation to visit Highgrove House, the private estate of the Prince of Wales in Gloucestershire. William selected Highgrove specifically for its provision of seclusion from the scrutiny of the press and the machinations of the palace. The estate's gardens, expansive lawns, and thick hedgerows provide a safe environment that has historically rendered it a preferred location for quiet, significant discussions. Anne departed Kensington Palace by automobile, her autonomous journey reflecting her independent nature. She preferred to drive herself to engagements whenever feasible. The rural roads were slippery and shiny under the overcast sky. Inside Highgrove's study, the warmth of wood smoke contrasted with the chilly gray evening outside. William awaited, collected but plainly burdened by the responsibilities of heir and his intermediary status between the king and the extended family. He informed her that he had seen the trend and believed it was a significant threat to the monarchy. As the heir, he was required to maintain political neutrality and refrain from actions that may be seen as familial discord. However, he privately expressed that his worry for the institution's image necessitated his intervention. He subsequently presented a compact encrypted disc and discovered an audio recording of a private conversation between Camilla and her son Tom, in which they discussed strategies to diminish Anne's prominence and elevate Tom as an informal face of the new generation. The tone of the recording was candid, strategic, and occasionally dismissive regarding the implications for established roles. The tape was made by Harold, a palace servant representative of a bygone royal era, long-serving, very private, and unwaveringly devoted to the late Queen. Harold dedicated his life to royal service. He understood the intricate protocols of closeness, the dynamics of household workers, and the mundane tasks essential for maintaining royal operations. Disturbed by what he had eavesdropped on in a hallway at Clarence House, the casual discourse on image manipulation versus institutional governance. Harold had taken the precaution of recording the conversation on his phone. He acted not out of malice, but from a profound feeling of duty to the crown as he had understood it for decades. The decision included risk discovery may result in swift termination and reputational devastation. He had, however, sent the tape to William via a reliable intermediary, stipulating that his name remain undisclosed for the safety of himself and his family. While listening to the audio in the study, Anne experienced what several others in the palace had dreaded. The dialogue was characterized not by casual social engagement, but by intentional planning. Camilla's voice, composed and assured, addressed the diminishment of the Princess Royal's prominence in media exposure and public engagements. Tom contributed remarks regarding relatability, gaining public support, and occupying a more favorable narrative position. This dialogue elucidated the strategies they envisioned: media positioning, meticulously scheduled human interest features, and the redistribution of seats and speaking roles at ceremonial occasions. It was a contemporary communication strategy used in the details of constitutional symbolism. William could not openly confront Camilla without jeopardizing a constitutional crisis, since the monarch's household and the dynamics among senior family members are not issues that Parliament addresses publicly. William, seeing the danger of permitting a private initiative to modify public-facing institutions, extended his complete support to Anne in tackling the issue within the family's governing frameworks. He advocated for prudence and discretion. The objective, he said, must be to safeguard the crown's dignity and prevent the conflict from becoming a public spectacle that may undermine public faith. The encounter solidified a discreet alliance between two senior royals separated by a generation, but unified in their commitment to institutional management, intent on safeguarding the crown from being influenced by personality-driven branding initiatives. Anne departed Highgrove with the encrypted disk and a revitalized determination. She went swiftly but deliberately. She generated several encrypted duplicates of the tape, storing them in various secure locations, a safe at her domicile with her trusted legal advisor under stringent confidentiality, and at the Royal Library Archive. Her impulse was one of protective guardianship, safeguarding the evidence to prevent its destruction or irresponsible use. The remarkable assembly of the Royal Council occurred at Buckingham Palace. The council is an antiquated semi-formal assembly consisting of senior family members, esteemed privy councillors, and a select group of councillors from the traditional aristocracy, those who bridge the gap between ceremonial monarchy and constitutional stability. Anne articulated the meeting's purpose with meticulous language. In her invitation, the agenda addressed urgent issues pertaining to the integrity of the monarchy's public image and the management of related budgets. This deliberately vague phrasing aimed to encourage attendance while concealing the incendiary nature of the evidence she possessed. Due to the room's importance, etiquette mandated Camilla's attendance. Her absence would have been noticeable. The council chamber resembled a historical theater set. Portraits of former rulers observed from the walls. The thick drapery and the silence of established tradition seemed to impart solemnity to each movement. William and other top officials came well prepared for the sensitive proceedings ahead. Upon Camilla's entrance, she seemed collected, although not entirely impervious. The courteous facade of public existence had a more pronounced edge, shown by a subtle tightening of her lips and a deliberate, unwavering stare. Anne positioned a compact digital player in the center of the elongated table and activated playback. Camilla's deliberate voice resonated on the gadget, followed by Tom's. The material was both clear and damning, a candid discourse on strategies to reduce Anne's public visibility, to elevate Tom as a contemporary representative of the family, and to adjust the hierarchy of precedence at official events. The tape conveyed not just a personal preference, but also a calculated attempt to influence the institution's public image. Silence ensued after the replay. A number of senior advisors experienced in managing palace turmoil and aware of the repercussions of public dissent exchanged glances. A retired statesman, a privy councillor recognized for his calm demeanor, clasped his hands and spoke little, embodying a posture that conveys seriousness without ostentation. A senior duke whose family's devotion spanned centuries was both anguished and determined. In private, several acknowledged their suspicions about such maneuvers, yet hearing the offender's voice solidified the threat in a novel manner. Anne then articulated her thoughts clearly. She stressed that the recording need not be made public. Her objective was a conclusion that restored institutional limits and thwarted personal desires from redefining the monarchy. She clarified that if the video were to be disclosed, the reputational harm would be significant, affecting not just Camilla but also the crown itself. She invoked the council's feeling of duty, reminding them that the monarchy's authority is tenuous and dependent on public confidence. She proposed that the organization may maintain resilience by earning public confidence via openness, tradition, and service. Camilla, clearly distressed, attempted to justify her actions as kind. She expressed a desire to modernize the monarchy's image in an age characterized by fragmented public attention, when conventional spectacle may seem remote to younger generations. She contended that increased inclusivity and relatability should not undermine the position of individuals born into the line of succession. Her appeal has a human quality. She sought not to be seen as scheming for personal advantage, but rather as an individual striving to maintain the crown's relevance. However, her theory was undermined by the evidence. The audio indicated coordination and strategy, rather than a spontaneous conversational inclination towards inclusion. Prince William subsequently proposed ideas informed by constitutional advisors and practical considerations about the crown's image and administration. The recommendations were intended to be precise and institutional rather than punishing. The communications role will be reorganized. The Royal Communications Department could no longer remain effectively subject to a single individual's family. A Royal Communications Oversight Committee would be established in its stead. The committee will consist of a limited but representative membership, the Prince of Wales, the Princess Royal, and a jointly nominated independent media personality with significant repute. Their mandate would include the approval of significant campaigns, the oversight of funds pertaining to public messages, and the assurance that communication tactics aligned with the Crown's institutional objectives rather than personal inclinations. Secondly, ceremonial seats and duties at significant national events would be formalized by explicit written guidelines that differentiate those in the line of succession from those connected by marriage. The instruction would formalize a practice that had long been regulated by customary understanding. Those of direct royal lineage clearly established in the line of succession would be granted prominent ceremonial positions. This was a direct reaction to the Abbey incident, intended to maintain the signaling role of sitting at communal public events. A new tier of financial control will be established. Royal charities, particularly those directly linked to specific family members, will undergo more stringent and frequent evaluations. Approval from 2 members of the Oversight Committee is necessary for budgets pertaining to media campaigns and external PR contractors to advance. The committee's endorsement would serve as a safeguard against the unilateral engagement of image experts whose endeavors may align with personal aspirations. The Council deliberated the suggestions with the diligence characteristic of those who comprehend both the nuances and significance of their past. Some expressed concern that stringent regulations may hinder essential modernization. Some contended that the legitimacy of the crown relied on consistency and equity rather than the fluctuating preferences of individual family units. Ultimately, the changes were seen not as a personal affront, but as institutional stewardship measures intended to preserve public trust and avert the perception of the monarchy functioning as a commercial enterprise. The vote, almost unanimous, favored reform. The council approved the committee and the new regulations. The decision sent a distinct message the monarchy would emphasize structural continuity rather than sporadic modernizations motivated by image management. This did not imply that the crown would remain immutable. Instead, modifications would be regulated by established protocols and by individuals who represented the institution's enduring interests. The repercussions ensued rapidly. The family maintained a seemingly unified front in public. However, inside the confines of the palace, Clarence House's informal sway over communication waned. The newly established Oversight Committee assumed control of all strategic communications. Public relations personnel hired for positions intimately associated with Camilla's home were either transferred or terminated upon the expiration of their contracts. The committee appointed individuals accountable to institutional governance rather than to a specific home. The emphasis returned to orchestrating the family's public engagement in manners that distinctly represented the line of succession and the monarchy's responsibilities. Initiatives to elevate Tom Parker Bowles to semi-official prominent positions were discreetly suspended. Recently received invitations disappeared state dinners, ambassadorial receptions, and prominent charity galas where he may have been recognized as a significant family member no longer included him on their guest lists. He was effectively reinstated to the life he had established outside the palace, a distinguished culinary writer-broadcaster and public personality, although devoid of the avenue to official ceremonial positions that the prior plan had suggested. Those acquainted with Tom assert that he embraced the shift with his usual humor and perseverance, resuming his career endeavors and family life. Camilla maintained her designation as queen consort, along with the inherent honor that entails. She persisted in executing official responsibilities and displayed in public the traditional respect associated with her position. However, the power she had cultivated via a highly focused communications staff and clandestine visits was much diminished. Her proposals for new initiatives were now under the scrutiny of the Oversight Committee. Once approved, they were recognized as consensus projects rather than individual endeavors. For many allies, this seemed as a reduction of influence. For others, it represented a recalibration acknowledging the inherent limitations of belonging to a historic national institution. Princess Anne's position not only regained stability, but also fortified. The restoration included significant symbolic moments that were as important as the administrative alterations. At a significant museum inauguration in Windsor shortly thereafter, an occasion intended to honor national tradition and continuity, the seating arrangement was crafted with meticulous intention. Anne positioned herself to the left of the Prince of Wales, a publicly esteemed location that revived the visual implications from the Abbey incident. The coat she wore that day, a utilitarian garment emblazoned with the emblem of one of her military affiliations, and her vigorous stride throughout the parade were documented and discussed not as trivialities, but as a reaffirmation. The media coverage under the new communications framework shifted the story to emphasize her qualities: steadfastness, a lifetime of service, and a determination to prevent the monarchy from being reduced to ephemeral branding. Commentary articles, now regulated and sometimes directed by the Oversight Committee's communication strategy, highlighted the merits of predictability and reverence for heritage. Commentators who previously lauded the image from Westminster Abbey as emblematic of modernity have now shifted their attention to the role of stability and tradition in supporting national institutions throughout tumultuous periods. The acclaim Anne garnered from civic leaders at public gatherings, enthusiastic, prolonged, and genuine, was seen in certain circles as public recognition of the private triumph she had pursued. Within the palace and during private discussions, The incident exemplified how contemporary communications can both bolster and undermine established institutions. The implemented changes were intentionally not a repudiation of modernity. Instead, they represented an effort to manage modernization via established protocols, emphasizing responsibility and engagement rather than arbitrary actions. The encounter left Camilla with intricate remnants. She persisted in executing the responsibilities anticipated of a queen consort, and several members of the public valued her compassion and advocacy for philanthropic endeavors. However, her ability to influence institutional policy and alter the public-facing framework without wider agreement had been restricted. Some of her acquaintances saw the council's decision as a chilling message. Others regarded it as a required compromise in a family where cohesion is sometimes the one safeguard against public disintegration. In private, she adjusted her strategy by emphasizing personal patronages rather than attempting to reform ceremonial hierarchies. For Tom, there was a pragmatic lesson: the royal fold adheres to principles that cannot be readily altered by public relations. He re-entered public life on his own conditions. However, the avenue to ceremonial significance had been obstructed. Harold, the servant responsible for the recording, faced personal consequences. His identity was safeguarded. He persisted in his faithful service, but with the prudence characteristic of those who had adopted perilous positions. Individuals inside the palace, acquainted with him for decades, assert that he acted out of a feeling of obligation, guided by a comprehension of the crown that emphasized constitutional continuity, and that he shouldered the gravity of his decision with solemnity. Princess Anne refrained from gloating in the aftermath. The success was more focused on institutional restoration than individual achievement. She recommenced her responsibilities with the same direct manner that had characterized her decades of service. The previous misplacement of a chair had disrupted a meticulous arrangement. Nonetheless, the reinstatement of seating, acquisition of committee supervision, and restructuring of communication together enhanced the clarity of the Crown's messages. The event, long after the images were preserved, became part of palace mythology, symbolizing the contradictions between contemporary image creation and inherited institutions. It highlighted the dichotomy of a public monarchy that must be both flexible and grounded. Camilla's inclination to include non-titled family members in the composition exemplified the contemporary tendency of families to amalgamate and redefine ties. Conversely, Anne's emphasis on maintaining the distinction between those whose power derives from ancestry and those whose presence is only a courtesy emphasized what many see as the fundamental rationale of the monarchy. Ultimately, the result maintained equilibrium. The Crown kept avenues for deliberate modernization while ensuring protections against unilateral alterations motivated by image management. The Royal Communications Oversight Committee serves as a structural conduit facilitating evolutionary change while safeguarding the institutional framework established over generations. The affair was a very personal matter for all concerned. Anne felt marginalized by a change that manifested in a solitary chair. Camilla felt she was assisting the family by enhancing its accessibility. Tom, an outcast by lineage, although not by aspiration, had momentarily seen a position that may have been his before being relegated to obscurity. William, caught between civic obligation and personal allegiance, opted to proceed discreetly but resolutely. Harold, the elderly servant, had jeopardized considerable resources to uphold his convictions. Ultimately, the palace, an establishment defined by both tradition and legislation, modified its procedures, reinforced its patterns, and progressed with the episode assimilated into its enduring story of continuity, adaptability, and the inherent human tensions that arise inside the peripheries of authority. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, and share it.